Welcome to The Stacks, a podcast about books and the people who read them. I'm your host, Tracy Thomas, and it is the Stacks Book Club Day, Toni Morrison Month edition. We are diving into Jazz by Toni Morrison with our returning guest, Professor Eve Dunbar. Set in 1920s Harlem, Morrison's novel intricately weaves together the lives of Joe and Violet Trace as their tumultuous relationship is tested by secrets, betrayal, and a haunting past. Today, Eve and I discuss the form and function of this novel, the naming of characters, and what makes Toni Morrison so dang good. There are spoilers on today's episode, and be sure to listen all the way to the end to find out what our October book club pick will be. Quick reminder, everything we talk about on each episode of The Stacks can be found in the link in the show notes. If you love this show and you want inside access to it, head to patreon.com/thestacks and join the Stacks Pack. I cannot make this show without the support of the Stacks Pack. And for just $5 a month, you get to be part of that community. You get to be on the Discord. You get to get bonus monthly episodes. You get to come to our virtual book club meetups. You get to know that by joining the show, you make it possible for me to make the show. And you get this fun little perk, which is shout outs on the podcast. So here's a huge thank you to some of our newest members of the Stacks: Jessica Brangiel, Sarah Lyle, Maya Schechter, Jacqueline, Trisha Manganiello, Amanda Seeley, Anne Bonley, and Megan. Thank you all so, so much. Also, if you're less interested in being part of a bookish community, but you still want to support the work of the show, might I suggest you head over to tracythomas.substack.com to subscribe to my newsletter called Unstacked. It'll go directly into your email inbox. You will get my hot takes, my opinions, keep up with all the events I've got coming, and of course, you will be helping to support the show. Again, that's tracythomas.substack.com. Okay, now it is time for my conversation with Eve Dunbar about Toni Morrison's novel, Jazz. All right, everybody, it is the Stacks Book Club Day. I am really excited. It is Toni Morrison month. We are talking about jazz, and we are joined again by author, professor, generally crowd-pleasing favorite guest, Eve Dunbar. Eve, welcome back.
Thank you. I'm excited.
The people love you, Eve. I knew they would. As we were recording, I was like, oh, this is really good.
You're sweet.
No pressure. No pressure. Okay, before we dive into the actual book, let me do like a quick sort of synopsis, though this one it's a hard one to synopsis-y, so we're going to do it kind of short. It's about a couple, Joe and Violet, living in New York City in the 1920s, and they have moved from the South. They're in their 50s, and Joe, at the start of the book, has taken a lover who he has also murdered, and Violet has gone to the funeral to slash the face of this young 18-year-old girl, whose name is Dorcas. And then the book sort of zooms out and in, taking us to their past and moving forward in the future. And that's really the synopsis.
Yeah.
I think
so.
It's like about the people in their lives. Okay, we always start here. First of all, how many times have you read this book approximately? And what do you generally think of it?
I've probably read it at least 5 or 6 times at this point.
Oh, shit.
Well, I have a terrible memory, so
okay, great.
and which is great for Morrison, because every time you read Morrison, 1, you're a different person. We talked a little bit about that last time,
yeah.
And 2, every sentence is so full, you never get it completely. So she's just a great author for kind of going back to and being like, oh, did that happen? Or, oh, I don't remember this thing. So yeah, it's always like the first time in some ways.
And what do you think of jazz generally? Sort of big thoughts.
It's one of my favorites only because, I think about it in light of what she's trying to do, and thinking about, for us, they would be people living in the middle of their lives,
Right.
and having lived through segregation or in the midst of segregation, grown up in a period post-emancipation, right? What does that mean? How do you build a life when your life had been so constricted for the first part? And what does it mean to sort of come into your freedom at 50, in the middle of your life? What kinds of disappointments, what kinds of like beauty is there? So I really like that element that she's really thinking about always. She's always thinking about freedom, but thinking about like, what does freedom feel like when you're not a kid and you're on the second act? Yeah.
I hadn't really thought about it I had thought about it being framed as like post-emancipation, but I hadn't really thought about also the idea of freedom and specifically being like in the Harlem Renaissance for that freedom, right? Like that's like a very specific time and place to be exploring that as well.
Yeah, I think that's really important because the way we understand the Harlem Renaissance as this period for, so much is happening for Black people across the country, not just in Harlem, but like, this is a moment historically where a lot of Black people are moving in ways they've never moved, right? Up from the South during that Great Migration, and just kind of thinking freedom looks like one thing because segregation is felt like oppression, like absolutely oppressive, and moving to these spaces where you think you're going to have this completely different experience. And it is very different, but really trying to navigate, what does that even mean for me as a Black person? And so the Renaissance is like just this great moment to set the book in for me.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to be honest with you
about
the book. I struggled. This was hard.
This
was really hard for me. Yes. So I will tell you what I loved.
Okay.
Because there was a lot that I loved. And I think what I struggled with is not actually a criticism of the book. It was a challenge of the book. So like there's nothing that I didn't like, but what I loved, I love her dialogue. I love her scenes.
Yeah.
She gives you the juiciest scenes ever. Like the scene between Hunter's Hunter and Golden Gray. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? That scene is like, oh my God. And like the dialogue is so good. So I loved that. I felt like I could see the work and the craft a lot in this book. Like I could see that she was trying to make the writing feel like jazz music in the ways that like we see these scenes and then she sort of remixes them in the same chapter and goes back and comes forward. Like I felt like I could see the idea of this book very clearly as a reader, which I was excited by. I was like, oh, I see what she's doing here. Where I struggled is I felt really unmoored by the plot. Like I sort of was like, what is this book? Like, I don't know what I read. Like, I don't know where I'm supposed to feel at. By the end, I was like, I don't even know what's happened here. I felt very like, what?
What had happened
like almost
was,
like like it was almost like I had read a collection of short stories that were interconnected, but by the end it sort of was like, well, the connection's like, I don't know, it just felt like it fell apart for me at the end, and I don't know what happened.
I don't know if I can answer that necessarily, but what I can say is that you sort of already described it when you said it. You can see the riff that she's doing on jazz, right? So what you're describing, I think, is what happens with jazz, right? Everybody comes to the table and they know we're going to play a song together, or in this case, we're going to read a book together. We're going to be in a book, right? If we go from the character's perspective, and what she allows is, okay, here's the book, and the book is talking to us, right? The book is the thing, and I'm not going to necessarily follow a linear narrative, right? We have a beginning, we have an end, and everything that happens in the middle is jazz. Everything, like there's no, people are playing similar notes, but they're going to play them differently. And I think if you kind of enter the book with whatever your understanding of jazz music is. I think that your expectation that you're going to get this thing that feels good or this thing that you can completely contain, you can let go of that, right? And instead experience all of these different threads for what they are and get to the end and sort of watch these two Violet and Joe pull the world up with their covers, and feel like, okay, I've done something. I might not have liked every note, or I might not have liked every line, but like everything together has created something really particular. I don't know if that's what you felt
I think that's sort of how I felt.
Yeah.
Like I sort of felt like almost like false starts for me.
Yeah.
Like there were sections where there'd be so much description of like a place or a moment or whatever. And I was just like, who are we talking? Like I would get lost in what was happening. And then we would come, because like almost every chapter sort of has like a lot of description and then like the action of the chapter. And in my mind, I was thinking about that as jazz as like going, like the sort of like playing around, and then you go back to the melody or like go back to the main line of the song.
Right.
And so there would be these, like she would preview maybe what was going to happen. And then she would do all this description. And then she would come back to the thing she had previewed and like play it out for you. And so again, I thought that was really cool because I felt like I could see what the idea was, but some of the execution was harder for me. Like I would be like, who's talking again? Or
can I
where am I?
Can I ask you, this is sort of, do you like jazz music?
Not really.
Well,
no.
Yeah, I'm not a huge jazz music listener either. But, when you sit down to listen to it or if it's playing, you just kind of, you ride, right? And you enjoy the note that you enjoy, or you enjoy that instrument and that person's riff on the line, right? And then the next person gets a shot. And I feel like, especially with those characters and maybe the main ones, Violet, Joe, and Dorcas, like they're all incomplete. They're all flawed. Dorcas is kind of too young to hate, but I think at points you're supposed to kind of see her as like a petty child who's playing with grown folks' lives. But did she deserve to be murdered? No. Right. But I think like even at the level of those kind of main characters, Morrison wants you to kind of align yourself, realign yourself, come back, go forward, and in that way, the jazz of characterization, I think is what she really gets well for you as a reader. And again, if that's not your bit, then you can end the book just like, well.
I think that's exactly right. And I don't like, again, none of this is really criticism of what she did. I think she executed exactly what she set out to execute. But for me as a reader, it's just really not the kind of book that feels satisfying to me, especially like when I think about like a Sula or a Song of Salt. Like it's like, because on this show we've been reading through everything. Like, for example, last year we read Tar Baby, and that ending is extremely vague and unsatisfying in a totally different way, right? It's like that book ends and you're like, what? He's blind, like he's on a island. What's happened here? But it's in line with the story. And this book sort of ends and it's almost like a totally different thing has started in that last little kind of mini chapter.
Yeah.
But I do think there's this one line super early in the book where Violet is doing a woman's hair and she's like talking about what's going on in her life. And the woman's like, are you trying to rival like a dead person? And she says, you can't rival the dead for love. You lose every time. And to me, I underlined it when I read it. And I think it is like sort of the thesis of the entire book, right? Like everyone's grappling with the dead people in their lives, whether it's Dorcas or in Dorcas's case, like trying to find some connection to her parents, or in Joe's case, trying to like connect with Wilde or whoever. Like there's this, and Dorcas, but there's this like underlying factor of like all of these people are trying to figure out how to rival the dead for love, and they're all like failing. Alice, like it's like everybody.
Yeah, and again, just in some ways, she gives you the thesis within the first like 10 pages.
Well, let's talk about the first. Okay, let me tell you my reading experience because I think you'll appreciate this. I opened the book. The first word of the book is STH, like sucking teeth. And I was like, what the fuck is this?
I was
like, what is this word? And then I read the sentence and I was like, oh, okay. And then I got to the bottom of the first or the end of the first paragraph and I had to put the book down and go on my Instagram and be like, you guys, I have found the perfect first paragraph in all of literature. Then I go back to the book and I read all the way to the end of the first section, which, is it in my copy. It's just it's like 2.5 pages later, and it ends with the what turned out is who shot whom. And I literally wrote in my book, Toni set this shit all the way the fuck up. Like it is the greatest introduction to a book I think I have ever read. I was so hooked. I think it is a spectacular start. Like I don't even know. The first paragraph is an entire short story.
Yeah.
Like with the parrot saying, I love you. She's killing the my God. And then the chapter ends with that parrot again. With the, I love it. The first chapter of this book was unbelievably good to me. I think it is the best Toni Morrison little thing I've ever read. To me, I was just like, holy cow. Unreal. I don't know. What do you think? You're a writer. I'm sure you think about these things.
I love the first sentence because you're like, who is this?
Yes.
Who is this
who
person?
Is this?
Who is this narrator who seems pissed from sentence 1, right?
Yeah.
I know that woman, right? So now I just love the way that opening line invites you into, gossip, really.
Yes.
Right?
We love gossip.
Right? And it's sort of like when you read, it's a very different tone from The Bluest Eye, which, quiet as it's kept. There were no, which is a different secret.
Right.
So she's to sort of, okay, this is a book that's about death, one, but it's also a book about love. Right. Mm-hmm. And then it's also a book about secrets. Who keeps secrets? Who do we keep our secrets from? What are the biggest secrets of anybody's life? So it has all of this intrigue from that first sentence, right? And that first section. So I always love it. My favorite lines, though, are also in the first section. She just is like on her shit here. In this
Is it about the Razor buildings?
No, it's the description of Violet, right? Okay. So she says, Violet did the dance steps the dead girl used to do, all that. When she had the steps down pat, her knees just so, everybody, including the ex-boyfriend, got disgusted with her. And I can see why. It was like watching, this is the line for me, like watching an old street pigeon pecking the crust of a sardine sandwich that the cats left behind, right? Mm-hmm. Like to describe Violet's, like this is her attempt at, I don't even know, it's not retribution. It's her attempt at like trying to figure out why Joe would do her like he did her. And everybody watching her is like, you're disgusting. Like you're trying to mimic this dead girl. And you look like the part of a sandwich alley cats don't want, and pigeons are, it's like the lowest of the low. And so to think about like, how do you even come up with that description of a person? And to me, every time I read it, I'm like, ooh, that's so low, Toni. That's so low to describe her in this way. So I just love that.
I love that too. I love that about her. I think like in some more contemporary fiction now, authors are thinking about how they don't want to quote unquote judge their characters, or there's this like idea that like you can't like that authors shouldn't be judging their characters. And I'm so fundamentally opposed to that. I think that what Toni Morrison does so well is judge her characters. She is not kind to them or generous with them. She sees them as they are, and she reflects that information to us in a way that, like, I have another line in, or another section in that same first part where it's after we learned about the baby getting her taking the baby. And she says that Violet, you know, is angry and she snatches her bag. And then that's the last time I do a favor for anyone on this block. Watch your own damn babies. And she thought of it that way ever after, remembering the incident as an outrage to her character. And I wrote, I know exactly who Violet is. Like in these little sentences. She's that woman who's like, she's fucked up. She did a bad thing, but then she gets in, she's Trump in some ways. She gets indignant when you call her out, right? And it's like, oh, I was just trying to watch your baby. And it becomes this whole thing in her mind. And every time the baby comes up, you know, she's going to bring up, I was just watching that girl's baby and she went and told everybody, right? And that she spins these ideas out in her mind so that she's never in the wrong. She's never the bad guy. She's always the aggrieved person. And I just, like, in that one sentence, I could just imagine, you know, she's that auntie you have who's like bitter and old and like crabby.
I feel like that's, yes. And I think like the thing that about that scene that's so interesting to me, to go to what you're saying about Morrison, in some ways she has no favorites, right?
Yes.
And Violet is aggrieved in a variety of ways, is troubled. And she also is like a human being. So she does weird things, like she tries to, I don't know if she's stealing this baby necessarily. I think she is in a state, right? And in the book, Morrison talks about that state, like as kind of falling into the cracks of life, that she has these moments where she isn't herself and is beside herself. And, you know, you could say, different people would say she has a second sense, right? She can see things that other people can't see. Blah, you know, some people would say she's crazy. So on that street, you have people who like see this young girl who's just left a baby with a stranger. And they're like, who leaves a baby with a stranger? And then there are other people who are like, that lady is crazy. Right. And in some ways, we don't know as readers where we stand, or you can stand in multiple places. And I feel like that is a gift that Morrison gives us as readers, is the opportunity over and over and again to come to a different relationship with a character, see them in that moment as like that auntie who can't be wrong, but also in the next moment to see them as somebody who is breaking, like she's literally breaking with kind of, in that case, a mother want, a mother desire, a desire to mother that's passed her by, right? We know that they've not, she and Joe haven't had children, but that might be something that she had wanted. They tried, it didn't work. And so it's like just this really, for me, not even complex, because that's to say it simply, but like this really human, like human characterization.
I think you're so right about the opportunities that Toni Morrison gives her readers to see the characters over and over in different ways. Because even though where the book starts, I was like, oh, I know who Violet is. By the end, I felt differently about her. Yeah. But I don't think that Toni Morrison changes her approach. No. Right? She doesn't all of a sudden soften to Violet and put Violet, like she just keeps giving us this information. Yeah. And like maybe, you know, I definitely do think she judges her characters in the sense that she has a point of view about them, right? Very strong. But she also gives us the space to have our own points of view by giving us a lot of information about them in these little tidbits and moments. And I think one of the things that Toni Morrison doesn't get enough credit for is being funny.
Oh, yeah. She's hilarious.
Funny.
Well, that's why I like that cat, like the pigeon scene. Yes. Like, it's hilarious. It's so rude. She's funny so and rude.
Yes. And like, I think, you know, it's like this almost, I use this word a lot to describe writers who sort of do the same thing. It's like this meanness. She's not nice to to people in her books. And I appreciate that because it makes the people feel so real. It's like, of course, if you saw this woman doing that dance, you would be like, ew. Maybe you wouldn't come up with crusty bread that nobody wants to eat, but you would be like, ooh, she's doing the most. This is so embarrassing. Like
It's
you would
so
have
weird.
that
Yeah.
feeling of like, ick, this is ick.
Yeah.
And I love that she gives us the opportunity to feel icky about these people, because then when you come to find out the backstory or whatever, you get to feel like, ugh, about these people.
Yeah.
And if you didn't feel the ick, you probably wouldn't feel the ugh.
Yeah.
Really very good vocabulary by me.
I think that's it though. I think that like real emotional response. And I think that's what we don't give each other most of the time, because we don't, maybe partners, perhaps children, but like we don't give our friends necessarily, because we can't be as close to them for as long as we are to partners and perhaps kind of close family members, like the opportunity to make mistakes, to be wrong and like mad wrong, like really wrong, right?
Yeah.
And come back to you, and come back to, come back to some good place with you. I think in this culture, especially, we are like, okay, I'm done. Like, we're never talking again, ghost, block, whatever the discourse is, or whatever the button you push is to just sort of get rid of this person. I think like that's where we are as a culture right now. I feel that. But I think Morrison, and especially in setting it in the 20s, especially in kind of creating characters, rich characters, is like, okay, what if you don't throw folks away? Like, how do you live with the man who cheated on you with a teenager right downstairs, right in your apartment building? How do you keep living with that man? Perhaps you're going to be kind of gross and try to like mimic this kid, but like, there's other stuff that happens in between that gets you from that absolute violation to a friendship with that person again. So I think that she kind of represents in the fiction the possibility of ongoing friendship after violation, which I think we probably all need to see or experience.
Yeah. And also, like, we're getting to see some really intimate stuff of people in a way that like you just don't get to people that you're building relationships with, right? Like it takes a lot of time, but here we get to do it in 229 pages, right? Like she cuts right to the quick.
Yeah.
And speaking of cutting, there is so much cutting razor imagery in this book. And I'm not really a close reader, but I noticed this and I'm wondering what is that? What does it mean? What do you make of it?
I mean, I could go academic on you and just
you can, please.
And say, there's this whole idea, because we're dealing with working class people, right? There's this like blues idea that violence is a form of intimacy. There are a couple of blues scholars who write about that, who write about the way that, let's say, a juke joint or a club, a blues club in the early part of the century, the way that those working class people kind of engaged with one another entailed a certain amount of violence and love and sex and all of those things. And that is a form of bodily autonomy and control over one's life. I don't know if I buy it necessarily, but you do see it in the blues. Blues music has a lot of violence. And although the book is called Jazz, Morrison is also kind of keyed into blues, a blues tradition. Sure. And so I think that what she's trying to get at, and I forget the character's name, she's talking to her, Alice, I think, who is talking about how she's trying to get out of, like, she's violence averse. I can't remember. If I find it, I'll reference it. She's violence averse, and she considers like upward mobility, right, as the key to escaping the kind of violence of working class life. I don't know if I believe that necessarily, but I think Morrison is trying to kind of think about that, right? Like what kinds of intimacies are available and condoned
Mm-hmm.
in different contexts, class context, regional context. And I'll tell this story only because it reminds me, I was at my grandmother's funeral. My uncle, and my grandmother's from South Carolina. My uncle was like, when we were kids, we would go back down south every summer, and we were at so-and-so's house, and somebody did something, and my grandmother pulled out a razor, and they were and they were about to cut each other, her and her like cousin. And he was like, it was so crazy. And so I just think about like a different time when this kind of intimacy and violence was, I don't know. I don't want to say common, but could break out. And so I think that Morrison is just kind of trying to capture that time when this kind of intimacy and violent intimacy was probably a little more commonplace for a lot more people.
That makes sense. And also I think the difference between like, I mean, nowadays we hear a lot about this, like, to shoot someone is very distant, but to stab someone is like a crime of passion.
Yeah.
And so I do think, because we have Joe shooting Dorcas, and then we have Violet coming with the razor to cut her, like that there is this like attempt, like that Violet is attempting this intimacy with this dead girl in the same way that she's trying on her dance moves and trying to, get the picture, which I was like, ew, messy.
Just
so
weird.
Gross.
Just weird.
So it's like, Violet is so cringe to me. And I'm like, Violet, honey, please. Like, please, Violet. But I hadn't thought about it in that way until you said that, but that makes so much sense.
Even Joe's choice to use that. I mean, there's all this like women don't use guns, men, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Like the gendered choice of the violence. But even Joe's choice of a gun, like he's so close when he shoots Violet, right? That's what's also terrible. And so I just think like all these folks, or these two folks in particular, these two characters are trying to get at a closeness that they don't have either capacity or access to through simply words, right?
Yeah.
Because we have these beautiful scenes, and it's so messed up to call them beautiful. But when Joe and Violet, or Joe and Dorcas, kind of spend the night together, and, Morrison describes how Joe is telling her things that he's never told anybody in his entire life, because she's the first person that he's ever chosen to talk, to tell. Like that's a deep intimacy. It's inappropriate. Absolutely. But I think like, that's the thing, like what is a part of me, just in talking to you right now, I'm thinking like, what does Morrison want us to know about intimacy? It's appropriate. When is it appropriate? What's the appropriate way to express it?
Yeah. Okay, wait, I have to ask you this because age gap has come up a few times this year on this podcast. We just did Parable of the Sower, which has a famously large age gap relationship as well. And obviously, like, we've never done Lolita on the show, but that's another book. What do you think? And I'm asking you to speculate here, okay? So I know you don't know, but what do you think is so interesting about age gap romances that so many like great writers spend time and energy doing it? Like, to me, I'm sort of just like at a place in my life where I'm like, that's icky. Like, I don't want to be here. And I wonder why there are other things that are icky that I also don't care about, like don't want to spend time with, but I feel like maybe don't get the same kind of treatment as this sort of older man, younger woman. And especially in the way where it's like, almost not a celebration of it, but like a humanizing of it, like making us want to feel sympathy towards Joe in some ways, right? Even though not only is he a man in his 50s who's with an 18-year-old girl, but he also then murders her.
Yeah.
Like he should be our villain. And Toni Morrison spends a lot of time trying to make us feel for him. And I'm just wondering, like, why? And again, I know you're speculating.
I don't know. I think, I mean, part of me thinks like we're in a different cultural moment where we see the inappropriateness because we have a different lens to talk about power and than they had even like 30 years ago, right?
Right.
I think everybody in the book thinks that what Joe has done with Dorcas is inappropriate.
Yes.
I don't know if in Lolita, like, you get that same the same presumption, and she's way younger too. But I think it has to do with masculinity and power ultimately, right? Like that men, and that's why it's important that Violet is also here as that kind of middle-aged, past her prime. Still, we know that she's beautiful. Like she gets a young boyfriend. Right. She's trying to outdo Joe by getting a younger, hotter boyfriend. So she can pull a young dude. So she's and
I think Felice says she's hot too.
Yeah, she's an attractive middle-aged woman. But I think like the culture has always been obsessed with youth and beauty, and Dorcas has that. She's also light complected, right? Like, so Morrison is playing on all these tropes of like what makes somebody desirable. And I do not know why. I think I want to say like men like this story because they get to live out fantasies about like being with like young girls. I think Morrison is really, again, trying to think about these questions of appropriate, like what's appropriate, what is the proper or the less violent way to love when we're just at this point 60 years, like 2 generations out of enslavement, like a group of people have never had the opportunity or are just very new to the opportunity to couple in the way that they want to couple and build lives and families with the people that they want to love. Like, how do you navigate? How do you know what the right thing to do is? How do you know? So I think she's interested in these questions. I don't know what to do with, the thing that she does with Joe is make him a crying mess from the beginning to, what I mean? So like you build sympathy if you're sympathetic to him because all he's doing.
He's the only male perspective that we get.
Yeah.
We hear about other men in the book, but we hear from Alice, or we see from Alice's side, we see from Felice, we see from Violet, we see from Dorcas, and then it's just Joe. And I think in my reading that in addition to like being like the crying, sopping sort of weak, whatever gender norm mess, it does sort of feminize him.
Yeah.
Right. Like it does. There's no other man to compare him to, really. There are other men in the story, but it's like you compare Alice to Violet.
Yeah.
You compare Dorcas to Felice. Like it's right there for you to do that.
Yeah.
And with Joe, it's sort of just like, and then there's Joe.
Yeah.
The sad boy.
He's a complete sad boy.
Yeah. Wait, hold on. We should take a really quick break and then we'll come right back. Valentine's Day is upon us and I've got love on the brain. Love for books. Duh, of course. Hello. Did you forget what podcast you're listening to? I love bringing you all great reads, exclusive author interviews, and behind the scenes book gossip. But I can only do that with your support over on Patreon and Substack. Our Stacks Patreon community, also known as the Stacks Pack, is where you can go for book club meetups, a private, very active Discord, and a year-long mega reading challenge to help you achieve all your reading goals. Plus, you also get that monthly bonus episode. Now, over on the Substack, you can subscribe to my newsletter, Unstacked, where I keep the book conversations going. I also give you a healthy dose of sports and pop culture, definitely some hot takes happening over there. And again, that bonus episode. If you don't have a few dollars to spare, don't worry. There are free options on the Substack and the Patreon to get you a little extra Stacks magic. Making this podcast is a total team effort, and by supporting my Patreon and my Substack, you allow me to support my amazing team that makes the show possible every single week. So if you or your friends are looking to meet other book lovers and support this indie podcast, come hang out with me on Patreon, Substack, or both. I would love to have you. And since we're talking about love, you can gift subscriptions to the Patreon and the Substack for that special reader in your life. For the Stacks Pack, head to patreon.com/thestacks. And for the newsletter, head to tracythomas.substack.com. And also, there are links to both in the show notes. Okay, see you in the Stacks. Okay, we're back. Continue with your thought about, we were talking about Joe being a sad boy.
Yeah, he's just a complete sad boy who needs to figure out for himself, like, why he's messing with a kid. And I think she gives us the rationale throughout the book as to, why.
Let's talk about Joe's backstory because, as I mentioned before, first of all, the moment Golden Gray is exposed to us, I was like, there it is. There's our tragic mulatto. We found him. He is here. I mean, as soon as I figured, I was like, flagged. I always love the tragic mulatto in any book. I'm always looking for it because I myself am, I am one. Not though I don't think I'm tragic.
Right.
But I just, especially the male one, like this, like, pretty boy, privileged, pretty golden boy. I mean, he's literally a golden boy.
Right.
His name is golden. His skin is golden. He has gray eyes. His last name is Gray. He's the cast off child of, doesn't even know it until, the action where he comes in. He's looking for his dad. And then he stumbles across a wild woman who, his name is Wild. I mean, the names in this
thin.
book.
It's thinly veiled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the names. I mean, the reveal of Joe's last name, Joe Trace, left without a trace. I gasped. I was literally like, oh my God, of course. It was like, he got to pick his own name. I'm like, why did he pick Trace? Like, what? And then it's like, your parents left without a trace. And then he goes to school and says that's his name. Oh my God. Anyways, but all of the characters in Joe's story, all of their names are very thinly veiled. We've got Golden Gray, the golden boy. We've got Wild, the wild woman. We've got the dad, whose name is Henry Lastory, or I think that's how it's pronounced, but there's some opportunity for change, but whose nickname is Hunter's Hunter because he's a good hunter.
Right.
And then, of course, the cat, King, the cat, who is a girl cat without a personality named for like a royal dog or something. I just loved that little bit. But yes, so the whole coming together of the stories and the fact that Golden Gray is actually raised by Violet's grandmother, I found that to be so fascinating because it's almost like this fated mates kind of love story then for Joe and Violet. It's like he falls out of a tree at the feet of a woman who is connected to his origin story for his birth. Like he doesn't exist potentially if not for Golden Gray saving his mom, but also maybe he exists in a totally different way if not for Golden Gray startling his mom.
Right. I think but what you just said is the key to me in terms of why he's such a sad boy, not just because of the kind of general sadness, but that this is fated, right? Like that the life that he is living is not the life that he chose necessarily.
Oh, yes.
Right.
And that's what makes Dorcas so exciting because he chooses her.
They have that whole bit, like he got chosen by Violet. He didn't do the choosing, but this is the thing that he chooses. And so I think Morrison is going to go back and give you all of this coincidence and ultimately the fatedness. But, in traditional storytelling, that fatedness would be the key to romance, right? That Violet and Joe are fated to be together and we should be happy, but no.
Right. And also like, because his story almost reads like a fairy tale, right?
Yeah.
It's like this golden boy, this prince, this rich, pretty boy. He saves the damsel in distress who is pregnant, who has this son, who learns to be a great hunter by hunter's hunter. And he should go off into the world and, you know, meet the damsel or meet the woman who he falls out of the tree. And we should have this hero. And instead, he is our pathetic, sad boy loser who's dating an 18-year-old. And I mean, like, it's like he's set up in every way to be the hero. But because of the way the book is written, we know that he's sort of a failed person when we get this backstory. But even the way that section is written, it felt really different to me. It felt like a fairy tale sort of in the midst.
And I think that the fairy tale, right, element ultimately has to fail because we're talking about Black characters too.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like that the reality is that these fairy tale endings are historically inaccessible to African Americans post emancipation into segregation. And so I think, like, again, Morrison's working all these threads to bring you back to, okay, so what do we do when we have all the elements or the plot elements and character elements for fairy tale, but then you're talking about America, and you're talking about Black characters who have to find a different way to access the fairy tale or a different fairy tale, right? And I think that to me, because I don't want to get in, you know, I'm not a sad sack necessarily. I don't think that, you know, Black life, I'm not a pessimist, is like nothing but sadness. And I don't think Morrison, like, that's why you have the ending to this novel that you have. She's like, okay, you have all of this historical reality, all of your personal mental health problems. And yet there's still possibility that you can find love, that you can find friendship, that you can find your way back to something that feels a little more whole. And I think that possibility and crafting possibility for Black characters is what I think a lot of people love about Morrison.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think the scene, we have to talk about the scene between Hunter's Hunter and Golden Gray, because I think one of the things, you know, there's that famous clip of Morrison being interviewed and the woman's like, well, would you ever write about white people? And she's like, you don't understand how profoundly racist this is. But I think this book is really interesting because the way that whiteness shows up in this book, the way that she drags white people without ever giving, she gives us one white character or two, I guess, if you include the dad or the grandfather of Golden Gray. But the way that she like inserts the violence of whiteness, but then there's the line in the scene between them. I gotta find it.
I'm looking.
The gasp again, where he says, he's like, I didn't come down here to court you or get your approval. He said, I know what you came for, to see how Black I was. You thought you was white, didn't you? She probably let you think it, hope you'd think it. And I swear I'd think it too. And then he goes on, he says, you know, they've got free N-words. And he says, I don't want to be a free N-word. I want to be a free man. And then Henry says, well, don't we all? Look, be what you want, white or Black, choose. But if you choose Black, you got to act Black, meaning draw up your manhood quick like, and don't bring me no white boy sass. And truly, I gasped again. Like, she tells you everything about whiteness in just that one little exchange. And it is unbelievable, because I think back to that quote of her saying, like, you don't understand how profoundly racist it is, but she is engaging with white culture in her work. And even though she centers Black people, you know, not to be too Kamala, but you exist in the context of everything that came before you.
Absolutely.
Like, there is no Blackness without whiteness and vice versa. And there is no 1920s Harlem or 1880s Rome or wherever the fuck they are in this scene, Vienna, which I also love that all the places were other places, Palestine, Vienna, Rome. I was
European.
But I love how it's such a trick of her writing. Like that she slides these pieces in to acknowledge that there is a whole greater context to these characters without having to be like she talks about the violence and what happens to what happens to Dorcas's parents and like all of that.
Yeah. But that is again, going back to this idea that like, okay, so white people are here, like they're always often at the periphery of her text, right?
Yes.
They're never central one, but yeah, we live in a world that is constructed by power, and she's going to show you the way power works always. And yet you have to keep living, right?
Yes.
And Black people have historically kept living. When faced with the reality of life in a white supremacist country. And so I think, yeah, she really, and that scene too is so great because here you are, a character who can pass, and you can choose. Are you going to go the white way, or are you going to go the Black way? And if you choose to go the Black way, you have to be ready to weather this place, right? And you can't be a sad sack. You can't be bumbling. You have to have a different sort of, in this case, he's saying masculinity.
Yeah.
But you have to have a different sort of vigor to make it through. And you, unlike a lot of people, you have a choice. Now choose wisely. And so I think like all she's going to drag whiteness, not because white people necessarily always suck, but many of them do in her books. But because white power makes things way more difficult than they ever need to be for all of her characters.
Right. And even in that exchange between the two of them, right, you know, Hunter says it. He's like, I know why you came, right? And it's like you go into that scene thinking you're going to get one thing. You think you're going to get Golden Gray being like, what happened? You didn't care about me, whatever. And immediately you get, I didn't even know you existed. It flips the whole power dynamic back to the mother, right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden becomes this whole other conversation. And I just think she's so good at sort of surprising and in many ways delighting her readers in these scenes. It's like there's all these little turns and tricks where you think you know what you're going to get, and it's never the thing that you're expecting. It's always slightly subverted or slightly, you know, fractured or broken. And just like from a storytelling perspective, it is what makes, for me, her work enjoyable.
Yeah.
It's like she sets you up in a framework that you understand. So when she, you know, just
shifts,
pulls the thing out from underneath you, you're like, oh shit. But it's not so crazy that she's not reinventing the wheel. She's just like put a little notch in it. It's like, oh, which I guess is a way of reinventing the whole thing.
Well, but it's also a way to, again, to get at what we've been talking about, which is like, you know, you think the world is going to be one way, and then you go out into the world and it's not quite what you thought. And how do you find your footing again? And I think like, again, this kind of, you know, when people talk about her capacity to create human characters, I think she also has a great capacity to create human situations.
Yes.
Like they may not be situations that we'd ever find ourselves in. Right. You know, but that you might go into a relationship, a job, a family event, and think you're going to hear this one story. And then somebody's going to be like, oh, no, that's not what happened. This thing happened. And then you have to like readjust who you thought you were, who you thought this person was. And I think that's the human experience that she's really gifted at. And it never feels contrived, or rarely does it feel contrived. Like I'm just doing this to like put you on your heels. That like, it feels like, oh yeah, the appropriate thing that a character should say in that moment, you know, and that's a writerly gift.
Yeah. I mean, there's a moment in the book that I wrote down in this same thing. It's very small, but it's the name Violet and then people calling her
Violet.
violent.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, is this Oprah? Were you silent or were you silenced? You know, the moment with Meghan Markle, I was like, oh, I know where Oprah got it from. Because you know Oprah be reading these books.
Yeah, Oprah loves Morrison.
But it's definitely, are you Violet or are you violent?
But I think she's also playing with this idea that there's innate violence in women, right? That we don't see. Or that somehow gets policed. To go back to what you were saying about like sad boy Joe, like how come he's the murderer?
Right.
And everybody's calling her violent.
Right,
you know,
right.
Violet, like she didn't even succeed in slashing Dorca's dead face.
She tried it.
She tried it, but she didn't get there, and she knew she wasn't going to get there.
Right.
You know,
but this is talked about in the book.
Yeah.
I mean, there's that whole scene where Alice is talking about the violence against women, and then she's like, but God gives everyone defenses.
Yes.
And if you don't use it, that's on you, sort of thing. Which weirdly do you know Shakespeare at all?
Yeah, a little.
It reminded me so much of the scene between Desdemona and Emilia, the Willow scene, because I do think it's husband's fault if wives do stray. And that like sort of that intimate conversation between women about like what men will do and what women should do in response. And obviously it's different because it's, you know, it's a different thing, but it just sort of is this like conversation of like, okay, well, we know men are going to be violent against women. We see it everywhere. But if women don't fight back, like that's on women. And I feel like for whatever reason, that's like my favorite scene in Shakespeare. I'm always thinking of the Willow scene, but it reminded me of that kind of like intimate womanly conversation about what men do and what women do.
And what the limitations of the responses that women can have.
And the expectations. Yeah.
And I think that that's kind of, again, Violet, to go back to the opening and the ickiness of her kind of really trying to step into Dorcas's shoes, literally, is that there are just so few socially appropriate ways of either mourning or being or responding. And you see her choose the wrong one in that, you know, the socially unacceptable. And even the baby scene, you know, mourning the fact that she's not a mother.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, thus stealing or borrowing somebody's baby.
Lending it out.
You know, just trying to see what it's like to hold this baby down the street. But I just think, like, what are the appropriate ways for women to behave? And these are questions that everybody's been asking, women authors ask over time,
forever.
Historically. Yeah.
So one of the things that I cannot figure out is who is our narrator? Who is this omniscient person who knows everything and sees everything?
The book, the city.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure. So someone in the Stacks Pack said that they think it could be Wild.
Oh, I never think it's an actual person from the lives. I always think, and I'm trying to figure out kind of how I arrive at this all the time, because you need somebody who lives in Harlem, like that's who's present in that contemporary moment to open up and say, you know.
But that person also has to know the backstory too. Like it's so, I don't know. Sometimes I like to just think it's Toni Morrison. Like it's just her. She's like, no, I know that woman. I wrote about her. I'm gonna tell you.
She's everybody though.
Yeah.
I think it's in part the city. I think, and then at the end when, you know, look where your hands are. Look where your hands are, right? Isn't that the last line? It says, so make me, remake me. You are free to do it, and I am free to let you, because look where your hands are now, right? And so I'm holding the book as I read this. So the book, the talking book, right? The book is and this is like the talking book is a tradition in African-American literature. You know, historically, Black people were not allowed to be taught to read or write. And so in a highly verbal, a vernacular culture, you have a different way of constructing books that's really around orality. And I think that opening line I know that woman, begins you thinking about the sound of the voice.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end, when she's asking us when the narrator is saying, look where your hands are now, right? You're called back to the physical book itself.
Mm-hmm.
And so like thinking about the way a book can talk and make a world, I think is really helpful for me in thinking about who might be narrating, who might know all the in this text.
Okay. I want to talk about the ending really quick between Felice and Joe and Violet, because in the first section that I loved so much, it ends with that they take another lover, another girl, but that it ends differently in whom shot whom or who shot whom. And I thought we were going to get another murder at the end, but we don't.
Right.
She sort of tricked us there.
She tricks you into thinking that this is...
That's how I read that it's like this one just ends differently because she says Violet invited her in to examine the record, and that's how the scandalizing threesome on Lenox Avenue began. What turned out different was who shot whom. So I thought, we have a murder.
Another murder.
Yeah, the whole time I was reading it being like, who's going to shoot? Yeah, who are they going to kill?
But I think that, I wonder if it's better to think about Cupid's arrow rather than an actual bullet.
That would have been smarter.
But I think it doesn't, I think that the real play for us is to see that if you're going to do this, if you're going to kind of bring a young person into your relationship, right. Then it has to be open, in this way, it's like an open relationship. Like, you know what I mean? It has to be open. And who shot whom, I don't know if it has to be a literal shooting as much as like who's, I don't know, affecting who's like in charge of the emotional leverage or the levers of love in this relationship, in this new throuple. But that is always for me, whenever I read this book, that relationship, I always never know what to do with it. Do you know what I don't know.
With Felice and them.
Yeah. Why they need to have this young person kind of be present in their relationship. I don't know. Do you feel like
no, I don't feel clear on why. Maybe because she knew Dorcas, and so she
can provide them with like
that bridge, because she didn't really like Dorcas, but also she knew her and was intimate with her. So she kind of bridges the two sides of like Violet not liking her and Joe missing her. Like that I guess. I don't. I think that last section after the murder scene, the book falls apart for I couldn't make sense of what I was reading. Like even the part where it's like, she says to Joe, Dorcas told me to say there's only one apple, just one, tell Joe. I was like, I don't even know what that, am I supposed to know what that means? Cause in her death scene, she's talking about oranges, and then all of a sudden it's about an apple. And I just I felt like I was able to hold everything in the book together up until the murder scene of Dorcas. And then those last two chapters, I just was like, I don't know where I am or why.
I think, I don't know how to answer that in terms of...
No, it's not really a question. It's just sort of
it's just a reading thing. And I do think that, again, this is why when we started, I was like, I read and I reread, and I still, after having reread it, I'm still not sure I completely understand. I understand I think you're right in terms of Felice kind of being this bridge character for those two to come back together. They need this third person to stand in, and in some ways in a better way than Dorcas stood between them. But I think that for me, I'm just like, well, okay, ultimately at the end of the day, these two kind of have to find themselves together, or they do find themselves back together. I guess that's a good thing. I'm not sure, but there's something there that every time I read, I'm challenged to try to kind of come to some feeling that beyond confusion. And I still have it. I still haven't gotten there.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
Okay, the last thing, which is sort of where we started, is the title of the book, Jazz. We talked about how it's written a lot like jazz music. The one thing I did want to mention is the word jazz is never in the book.
No.
In all of her other books that I've read, the title appears in the book in some way or another. My personal favorite is how it's revealed in A Mercy. That's the title that was my take your breath away moment in that book. It's interesting that she doesn't, because there's time where they talk about the music. Alice talks about how bad the music is. I think that Violet and Joe in some ways are all of the things that Alice thinks are bad about the music, sort of personified, like that they're violent and they're evil and they're crazy and all of this stuff. But she never says it. Do you have any sense as to why?
Why it's not present?
Why the word isn't in the book?
Yeah.
It's a departure from everything else that I've read by her so far.
I wonder if it would just be on the nose to have people say, and now we're listening to jazz. I also wonder if, if they're actually, because I think they're listening probably to blues, like the OK record that even in that early scene is going to probably be a blues record, but it's the jazz age. So I'm wondering if she's like, well, it's on the nose to call it, to have jazz, to have somebody say, and now we're going to go listen to jazz, or this is so jazzy. I guess somebody could, you know what I mean? Like it might be one of those, just like she doesn't say this is the Harlem Renaissance. Like they wouldn't have called it.
She never says New York or Harlem. She only says the city.
So there's no like direct naming of period, of place, or of musical genre, right? Yeah. But I think like for her, the form of the text is the naming of it. I mean, yeah, that's where I would say, that's where I leave it. And I also think like it gets at what she's really, the unformedness of like, what does it mean to live through and in the middle of something, a time that when you're living through it doesn't have a name, right? Or isn't going to be named what we would name it now. And so like, don't drop jazz in because it's not like people aren't thinking like that, right? You know, at that point. But now after the fact, we as readers and listeners of music, perhaps like know, okay, well, this is what a jazz novel looks like, or this is what jazz music does. So I think like it's kind of capturing the makingness that this is that she's interested again in capturing what it means to make yourself. Right. And not really have the words or the language or anything to describe completely what it is you're making. And so I feel like actually I like that we don't have that superimposition of the word coming out in this kind of what I would imagine would be a weird moment if somebody were to say, now let's go to the jazz club, or, you know, it just would be cheap. I don't know. I feel like it might be a little bit, I'm sure she could figure out how to do it so that it wasn't cheap. But I also think not doing it is just, it captures the like making, the fact that this is a time and the people being made for the, you know, on their own, and they don't have the words and they don't have the capacity to describe it completely in a single word.
That's such a good place to end. Okay. This was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Everybody, don't forget to get your copies of Monstrous Work and Radical Satisfaction, Eve's book that comes out in November. Eve, thank you so much for being here. This was really a treat.
Thank you so much, Tracy.
And everyone else, we will see you. Oh, wait, everyone else, don't forget to listen to the end of the episode to find out our book club pick for October. And we will see you in the stacks. All right, y'all, that does it for us today. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you again to Eve Dunbar for being my guest. I'd also like to say a huge thank you to friend of the pod, Kiese Lehman, for helping to make this conversation possible. All right, it is time for the announcement you've all been waiting for, our October book club pick. We are going to be reading the 2019 novel The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. It is a gripping story of injustice, resilience, and survival set against the backdrop of a corrupt reform school during the Jim Crow era. The book won the Pulitzer Prize. It is being adapted to a film that comes out on October 25th, and our episode will drop on October 30th. You have to listen to our October 2nd episode to find out who our guest will be for this discussion. And if you want 10% off your copy of Nickel Boys, head to rep.club and order your copy and use the code STACKS10. That's rep.club, search for the book The Nickel Boys, and use the code STACKS10 for 10% off your copy. If you love the show and you want inside access to it, head to patreon.com/thestacks and join the Stacks Pack. And check out my Substack at tracythomas.substack.com. Make sure you're subscribed to the Stacks wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you're listening through Apple Podcasts or Spotify, be sure to leave a rating and a review. For more from The Stacks, follow us on social media at The Stacks Pod on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok, and at The Stacks Pod _ on Twitter. And you can check out our website at thestackspodcast.com. This episode of The Stacks was edited by Christian Duenas with production assistance from Megan Caballero. Our graphic designer is Robin McCrite, and our theme music is from Tagirajis. The Stacks is created and produced by me, Tracy Thomas.